We're done. We're done. We finished. We're gonna do a bunch of What it do, baby? Welcome back to another video, y'all. My name's Chris. I know how to read. Allegedly. And we are going to be buying 15 books in 15 bookstores.
Hell yeah.
This is a video that I've been wanting to make for a really long time. Probably even before I started making YouTube videos, I had the idea for this video planned. I struggle a lot watching book haul content because I recognize, like, obviously people have to buy books in order to read them. But I also think there are some people that will buy like 80 books and then have like a massive book haul video. And then they really only read like 20 of those books, and then 3 videos down the line, they're already like giving away a ton of books. Which obviously there isn't anything like necessarily bad with that, but I've always been kind of the type of person where if I have a book or if I'm buying books, I want to make sure that they're books that I'm going to read and books that I'm going to enjoy. So that's going to be the plan for today. We're going to, I think, if I did my math correctly, 15 bookstores. We're going to get 1 book at each store. And then we're also just going to do a little exploring of like New York City and Manhattan and a little bit of Brooklyn in there. I don't really know exactly what books I want to get. I have like my TBR or TBB to buy list or whatever, but I'm really just going to kind of walk in and hope for the vibes. So thank y'all for all the love and support. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let's finish getting dressed and then let's buy some books. Let's go. I don't think I explained my take on why I don't like book haul content that much, or just any haul content in general. I just remember when I was a kid and I would watch people like with basketball cards or with books or whatever, they would like have a ton of stuff and they would unwrap it and they would be like, look at all this free stuff I got or stuff I paid for or whatever. And at one point, I don't know when the switch happened. It went from me being like, oh, it's so cool that this person has all these things. And then it became, damn, it sucks that I don't have these things. So like I stopped kind of watching that content, and it feels weird making this video where it's like, I mean, I love capitalism. I love consumerism. I'm gonna buy every book eventually. But it also makes me feel kind of weird because I'm kind of indulging in the same content that I don't really enjoy. Again, me personally, I know I'm gonna read every book that I get, and I know that a lot of people will buy a ton of books and then not read them for years, you know? This is something I've been planning to do for a while, but I don't know how much we're gonna get done today. Every book that I buy, I'm gonna keep the receipt, and then I'm gonna count up all the receipts at the end of this video, and then I'm just gonna match that and then make a donation to some charity that gives books to kids or something. I haven't decided which one yet. I have a couple that I wrote down. I don't know which one yet. I'm not saying everyone has to do this. I'm not saying that people that don't do this are bad. I just feel weird when I spend a lot of money and I don't give back when I know that I could. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. We just had breakfast. What's this place called? Liberty Bagels. It was gas. I think our next bookstore is like a half-mile walk away, so we're gonna go there. originally I had filmed something that was like, hey, today's the end of day 1 or whatever. Instead of doing like a day 1 recap, I'm gonna show y'all everything from day 2. And then we'll have the recap of everything where I show you all the books, and then we'll tally everything up, and then we'll figure out how much money we're donating. So we're gonna take a little break here, make sure your water's full, make sure you still got your snacks, refresh anything that needs to be refreshed. We're gonna move on to the day 2 montage of all the bookstores that we went to, and then we're gonna have one final kind of recap at the end of day 2. So we're gonna go on to that, and I'll see y'all in a second. No mic, no nothing. Today, at least the end of the day, was not great. It was not great. So I'm gonna change. I think I have an event I'm going to. I'm gonna watch some nerds play D&D, and then after that, I will do a recap of all the books and all the bookstores that we went to. All right, not so good lighting aside, I have a big stack of books right here. I have a bunch of receipts that we're going to be going through to decide or to figure out how much our donation's going to be. And then I also have a roommate who said I could squish. So originally this was going to be 15 books in 15 bookstores, but 2 of the bookstores that we were supposed to go to in Brooklyn on our first day probably would have added about 3 hours round trip to go to both bookstores. and we would have gotten to our hotel too late, and we decided to X those 2 bookstores out. I'll put them both right here. Let's get my head out the way. I'll put both of the bookstores right here. I'm sure they're dope. I'm sure they're awesome, but we just didn't have time to go to those 2 bookstores. The first bookstore we went to was Books Kinokuniya. Super pretty. The weather was like really cold, and when I walked in, I knew it was gonna be like very Asian influence, and that was like very apparent and cool. When you walked in, the first floor was like your general bookstore vibes. When you went into the basement, which is completely surprising to me because I forget that stores that aren't in Florida have basements because that's just how their land works. Their basement floor had some manga stuff, but it was mostly like stationery and also books in like traditional Chinese and Japanese like language. Their second floor was where all the manga stuff was. So they had obviously manga, they had posters, they had figurines and stuff like that. Overall, very cool influence. They also had a cafe up there that looked pretty cute. But I was thinking, and this was an incorrect thought that roommate and I had while we were there, but I wanted to get a book that was kind of by like an Asian author because there wasn't, or at least at the point we thought, there wasn't going to be another Asian focused bookstore on the list. So the book I ended up getting at Kinokuniya was Haruko Murakami's 1Q84. Heard a lot of really good things about this book. It's one of those books where it was recommended to me for so long and all I knew about it was just this cover right here. Like I've seen this cover for years now. Everyone has said really good things. I know Murakami is like a legendary writer, but I think with how popular this book is, it is going to be a great introduction. On the back, it says a love story, a mystery, a fantasy, a novel of self-discovery, a dystopia to rival George Orwell's 1Q84 is a tremendous feat of imagination from one of our most revered contemporary writers. A lot of people have said that this isn't his best book. It's just one of his more popular ones. So I want to use this book as kind of like a test to see how I like Murakami's writing and just their style of writing. And then if I like it, I can delve kind of deeper into his bibliography. It's not bibliography. It's not discography. His work. I really enjoyed Kinokuniya, very beautiful bookstore, very great location, not too far from where we stayed. And I think this was a great book to kind of represent that bookstore. So that was our first stop, Kinokuniya, and I spent, let's see if I can find the receipt. Including tax, I spent $23.95 on 1Q84. Second bookstore we went to was a place called Book Culture. Again, very cute bookstore. This was the one after seeing like, commercial isn't really a great way to describe Kinokuniya, but Book Culture did such a good job of being like a neighborhood bookstore, if that makes sense. Obviously, it has like very popular books, like the books that like the average person like me is gonna come in and buy. But their second floor had a bunch of used books as well as books on sale. And they also had a bunch of books that like kids and students would use for school. So it felt like, you know, not only are you coming in here to buy the latest Sally Rooney, whatever, but you can also come in here to get like your required reading for school. But this was one of the bookstores. Like I walked into Kinokuniya not knowing what I wanted to get, and I kind of searched for a little bit and walked around. When I walked into Book Culture, I saw it and I knew exactly what I was going to get, which is You Dreamed of Empires by Alvaro Enrique. I heard a one-sentence review of this book, and I don't know, I don't even remember what the sentence was. But when I heard it, I was like, I have to get my hands on it, and I'm very happy that I did. On the back, it says, one morning in 1519, Hernan Cortez, accompanied by his captains, his troops, his translators, and his prized horses, arrived at, I'm just going to put it up on screen, seat of the Aztec Empire. Today's Mexico City. Despite a bungled entrance, the conquistador and his entourage are invited to a ceremonial welcome meal, then ensconced in the labyrinthine palace. As they await their meeting with Moctezuma, unaware that the emperor, at a moment of political and spiritual crisis, is riding a hallucinogenic high, they wonder, why the warm welcome? Will they escape alive, much less vanquish the empire? And what if they don't? At Book Culture, I spent $19.60. Y'all don't have to worry about it. I'll keep the tally. I'm just saying this so I remember. The next place we went to was probably one of my favorite places, or one of my favorite bookstores specifically, I should say, which was The Corner. Super small spot. Super small. Very kind of like close quartered. It was a very like selective group of books that were in there. There were also very like no phones inside, or at least to take phone calls outside. So I didn't want to be, that one guy with like their phone out recording everything. So I'll try and put some pictures up, but it's a really small spot. All the employees in there were super nice. So I originally walked in there with a goal, right? At this point, I had gone to 2 bookstores and I hadn't gotten something that like, I very specifically, like I walked in that bookstore, like I knew exactly what I was gonna get. So in this bookstore, I really wanted to get Stephen King's 11/22/63 because that is, one, it would be my first Stephen King, and two, is a book that's been on my TBR, for a very long time. I had a conversation with the lady. They didn't got it, but they had another Stephen King book, which is a book I ended up getting, which is The Shining. Shout out Ian Goobley. If you haven't seen his channel, something will pop up. Y'all can click on it there. Big fan of his, big Stephen King fan. And this is going to be my first kind of introduction into the world of Stephen King. On the back it says, Jack Torrance's new job at the Overlook Hotel is the perfect chance for a fresh start. As the off-season caretaker at the atmospheric old hotel, he'll have plenty of time to spend reconnecting with his family and working on his writing. But as the harsh winter weather sets in, the idyllic location feels even more remote and more sinister. And the only one to notice the strange and terrible forces gathering around the Overlook is Danny Torrance, a uniquely gifted 5-year-old. I've heard of The Shining. I've never seen like the movie, and it also inspired a sequel called Dr. Sleep. It looks like, I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about Stephen King. I always thought that my first Stephen King was going to be 11/22/63, but also with how popular and how big of like a movement, if for lack of a better word, The Shining was, I am also happy that this is my first introduction into the legendary writer. I spent $15.19 at the corner. Next bookstore that we went to was actually a very long subway ride away. It's the Word bookstore in Brooklyn. 2-story spot, very cute. I love the vibes that were in there. The decorations were nice. I kind of looked around there for a little bit actually. Like again, like this was one of the times where like I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't have a plan when I walked in. I wanted to see if there was something that spoke to me. I did have, I wish I did a better job of like documenting this, but this was one of the places where I did it. Like I had like 3 books that I really wanted to get. One of them, and it kept haunting me in every bookstore that I saw it in, was There's Always This Year. Another book I really wanted to get was The Wide Wide Sea, which I think I talked about in my 100 most notable books video, but that was also very interesting. The book I ended up getting, which I've talked about a lot on this channel, is Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Won't spend too much time on this because like I said, I have talked about this in a bunch of videos, but it's one of the books that I had on my to-buy list that I actually have already read. All the previous books I haven't read, but I listened to the audiobook of Sapiens and I loved it so much. And one of the main reasons I wanted to get a physical copy was to see if I liked it as much as the audiobook. But if you're in the Brooklyn area, I highly recommend going to the Word. Everyone there was super nice. The lady there, I told her I was paying in cash, and she was like, oh, that's perfectly fine. You just can't pay with a $100 bill. Like I got money like that. This is the most expensive book that we actually bought. It's not even a hardcover. It's like a harder paperback, if that makes sense. And it was $28.30 for Sapiens. Next bookstore that we went to, the next 2 bookstores that we went to were right next to each other in Brooklyn. We went to Greenlight Bookstore as well as the Center of Fiction. In Greenlight, very nice environment. It was a little bit bigger than some of the other bookstores that we went to, but the employees were super nice. The music was banging. Like it's louder than like, or maybe it was just that day that we went, but the music was a little louder than your average bookstore, but whoever was on the playlist was killing it. I loved the vibes that they were putting out. We didn't spend a lot of time in this bookstore because I walked in and I knew immediately what I was gonna get because I like saw it when we were walking in from the window. And that was The Overstory by Richard Powers. I've talked a bunch about this on this channel as well. If I remember correctly, this made my top 3 favorite books of all time so far. In my worst case scenario, it's in the top 5, but like Sapiens, I actually didn't listen to the audiobook of this. I read it on my Kindle when I was going to Puerto Rico in March. I loved it, and before I finished reading it, I knew that I wanted to reread it. So I've been waiting to get a physical copy in my hands for a long time, and I'm very excited to eventually dive back into this. But if you're in the Brooklyn area, Greenlight is very, very nice. The other place that we went to in Brooklyn was a walking distance from Greenlight, and that was the Center of Fiction. Shout out to another YouTuber, Jack Edwards, who also did a book shopping video. He went to Greenlight and to Center of Fiction, and he kind of made me want to go because it looks so cool. Probably the most like aesthetically beautiful bookstore from the outside looking in and from the inside that we went to. Gigantic wall of books with a super big ladder. All the employees there were really nice. There was like a conference presentation, like cafe studying space, if you want to call it that. And it was really, really nice. Roommate noticed it before I did, but they had a very good like books in different languages section. Like, even though like each section was a little small, but they had books in a ton of different languages. They had French, they had Spanish, they had Italian. I'm forgetting a fourth one, but they had a fourth one too. And overall, very aesthetically pleasing bookstore. And the book I ended up getting at this bookstore was Smoke Kings by Jamal Mayfield. I'm going to be very honest with you guys. The only reason I got this book was because it was on the New York Times 100 Most Notable Books of 2024, and the 1 or 2 sentence description it gave me in that article was interesting enough that I decided to spend. I spent $21.75. They didn't give me a receipt on Smoke Kings, and then I also spent, because I think I forgot to say it, $20.63 on the Overstory. So about the same price. Two kind of like very different bookstores, but they were both very beautiful. If you're in the Brooklyn area, they're like quite literally 3 baseball throws away from each other, which is the most American unit of measurement I could say. We started the day at a very cool bookstore. The vibes in this bookstore, when I say they were immaculate, they were immaculate. And that was, I believe it's called the Mysterious Bookshop. I didn't get a receipt from them, but it was called the Mysterious Bookshop, and the vibes there were awesome. The employees were really cool. I think we got there like 10 or 15 minutes after they opened, and everyone was in such a good mood. They were talking about Jake Gyllenhaal. There was an author there doing like signed copies of her book, and the entire bookstore, like the title says, is all mystery and like crime thrillers and stuff like that. This was one of the bookstores that I knew we were going to, and I didn't want to like predispose myself to getting a specific book. They had a lot of really cool editions of Sherlock Holmes. They had like an entire wall dedicated to Sherlock Holmes, but since I already had volumes 1 and 2 that I've talked about in previous videos, I didn't want to get like another Sherlock Holmes thing. But I think once I get to the point where I can buy different versions or different editions of the same book, I'm definitely going to go there, because they had like, not an exaggeration, they probably had like 30 different variants or editions of every and all Sherlock Holmes book. The book I ended up getting is called Catchpenny by Charlie Huston. I knew nothing about it, but isn't this like a pretty dope cover? The blurb on the back says, "A thief who travels through mirrors in search of magical curiosities, a video game that threatens to spill out of the virtual world, a doomsday cult on a collision course with destiny, and a missing teenager at the center of it all. With the world on the brink of every kind of apocalypse, humanity needs a hero. What it gets is Sid Catchpenny." But also on the front cover, it has a blurb from Stephen King that says, "I absolutely loved it. Catchpenny is a brilliant book full of heart, and the language is pitch perfect. If Elmore Leonard," I don't know who that is, "had ever written a fantasy novel, this would be it." I think if Stephen King says that the language of something is pitch perfect, I don't know how much better of a blurb review you can get. So that little thing by Stephen King did a lot of heavy lifting, I loved kind of the little description, and the cover was dope. So I know absolutely nothing about this, but I'm very excited to eventually get into it. They didn't give me a receipt, but I did the math, and it was $19.58 for Catchpenny. Now, when I said there wasn't going to be another bookstore that had kind of Asian influence, we were entirely incorrect, because the next bookstore we went to was You and Me Books, which is actually, I found out, the first female Asian American owned bookstore in New York City. Again, I was in a themed bookstore. I wanted to get a book that was relating to the theme of that bookstore, and I kind of went out on a limb here. I wanted to get fiction too for some reason. I was like, I have a lot of nonfiction in my current bookcase and with all these books that I'm getting, so I wanted to get something that was fiction and also that I knew very little about. The book I ended up getting was She Who Became the Sun, a novel by Shelley Parker Chan. On the back, it says, "She Who Became the Sun reimagines the rise to power of the Ming Dynasty's founding emperor." And it has a bunch of very popular blurbs from people I don't know on the back, but this cover's really cool. When I was paying for everything, the lady at like the register said a bunch of very nice things about it, and also said that there's a sequel to this book, that if I like this one, she enjoyed the sequel very much. I also forgot to take the bookmark out of this. You and Me Books, 3 years in New York, and I got stickers. Everywhere else, they had merch, they had things, but I didn't want to get stuff. And then when I saw those stickers, I said, why not? Let me get some stickers. Let me support a small business. But I'm very excited to read She Who Became the Sun. Again, I did not get a receipt, but I spent $20.66. This next place was so cool. I didn't know anything about it, about the place specifically when I walked in, but we went to the Housing Works Project bookstore. I don't even know if it's like has bookstore in the title, but it sells books. It's essentially like a very curated like thrift store. I don't even know if I would call it like a thrift store. Like what would you call Housing Works?
It was a very more than a bookstore store. Like, it was bookstore and things that you may also like if you are into those things. So it had like vinyls, nice clothes, it had like their own merch as well. Yeah. Kind of like a bookstore gift shop, maybe.
I like what you said. Yeah, like it was definitely more of a bookstore kind of bookstore. It had, I think it was all used books too. I don't know if there were new books in there. So it was like, it felt nice to be in there because it was very obvious that like the people who worked there like really cared a lot about what they were doing. And I'm not saying the people in the other bookstores didn't, but it was just like more obvious when we went to Housing Works. I saw this and I had heard so many people talking about it, and I've only heard good things from people talking about it, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. On the back, it says that this is a murder mystery, a courtroom drama, and an exploration of erotic rivalry in a series of triangular love affairs involving, quote, the wicked and sentimental Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov and his three sons, the impulsive and sensual Dmitri, the coldly irrational Ivan, and the healthy, red-cheeked young novice Alyosha. Through the gripping events of their story, Dostoevsky portrays the whole of Russian life, its social and spiritual strivings in what was both the golden age and a tragic turning point in Russian culture. A bunch of booktubers I watch have made videos on this book, and they've all said it like changed them, or that like the writing was insane or everything. This is a very big book, and the words are very small, and I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I'm very happy that I'm going to have this on my bookshelf because I feel like it's one of those books for a lot of people. It's like an award to themselves when they finish reading it. And it just so happens that not only is the book long for the sake of being long, but it's also like insanely awesome storytelling. So I'm very happy to get to this eventually. And it's also the cheapest book because, again, like everything in that awesome, again, more than a bookstore, but I'm going to say it's a bookstore. It was the cheapest book that we got at. I also didn't get a receipt, $9.75 for a copy of The Brothers Karamazov, like 1,000 pages for $9.79 is crazy. This one was a weird bookstore for me, right? So the next bookstore we went to was The Strand, right? Incredibly popular bookstore, insane. And I mean this in the nicest way possible. It's like if Walmart was all books, right? Their merch was absolutely crazy. They have a restaurant in the bookstore. 3 floors, every genre you can think of. There was a gardening section in the basement. A section. It was definitely the most populated bookstore that we were in. Easily, like combined with all the 3 floors, there were probably 100 people in that bookstore. I started freaking out like 10 minutes in. I saw this book maybe after about like 3 minutes of searching, and I still did about like 15 or 20 more minutes of looking through all the floors, but I eventually came back to this. It's a book that I started listening to on audiobook. And I listened to the first chapter and I loved it so much, I said, let me hold off and let me get a physical copy. And that was Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. A very popular book. This was actually in there. They had an entire table dedicated. They had tables for everything. Any topic you could think of, they had a table with like 30 books on it for that topic. They had the ill-fated book talk table that I know a lot of people don't like. But this wasn't their banned books table. I didn't know this book was banned. But the first chapter of this book talks about how this entire, maybe it's the introduction, maybe it's not the first chapter, but this talks about how Howard Zinn goes through the history of America. So I'm going to read the blurb on the back here because I don't want to mess this up. With an introduction by Anthony Arnaud, this edition of the classic national bestseller chronicles American history from the bottom up, throwing out the official narrative taught in schools with its emphasis on great men in high places to focus on the street, the home, and the workplace. And so when I listened to this on audiobook, I thought that was a really interesting like avenue to take. Like instead of focusing on the people that did the conquering, to write an entire book based from the perspective of the people that were conquered, whether it was about the United States or not, like I thought that was a very interesting like avenue to take. And I know with any history book, people are going to be like, maybe obsessive isn't the right word, but people are going to be like very kind of honing in on the things that the author decided to keep in and the things that the author decided to exclude. So I'm very happy to tear through this eventually. Again, very long book with very small words, but I've been wanting this book for a while. It's been on my TBR for a long time, and I'm very happy that I was able to go to like a very like populous bookstore and get a book that had been on my list for a very long time, if that makes sense. Funny story, I was freaking out so much, like my social anxiety was going crazy when I was in that bookstore, that I gave the person at, let me see if I can find, I paid $25.03 for this book. I paid with $26 in cash, and I give the lady the book, and then she scans it and says, all right, $25.03. I give her a 20, a 5, and a 1. She says, thank you. And I walk out of the bookstore without my book because I'm freaking out. And the lady very nicely ran out and said, hey, you forgot your book. And I was like, thank you. Because I'm stupid. Even though the bookstore kind of made my heart beat a little faster than it probably should, the people working there were very nice, so I was very happy for that. So one of the things I wanted to do on day 2 was get like a tote bag to put all my books in, because I am a note tote bag having boy. That changed when we went to Three Lives and Company, and I love that bookstore so much. It gave me very much like the Corner vibes. There were a lot of people in there. It was like probably a little bit bigger than the Corner, but there was probably 10 or 12 people in there. The bookshop employees were very, very nice. Their different sections were very cool. I love that they had a very large section of paperback and a very large section of hardcover. I ain't got hardcover money, but I appreciated them thinking that I didn't know what I wanted to get at Three Lives and Company for a very long time, but one of the things I did get was this tote bag. Look at this heavy-duty tote bag. It's red, it has this logo on one side and then this logo on the other. So after we went to Three Lives and Company, this stored both or all of my books and then I think 1 or 2 of Rumi's books. I ended up paying more for the tote bag than I did the book, but the book that I ended up getting, this big chonkin piece of book, is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Thrown in prison for a crime he has not committed, Edmond Dantes is confined to the grim fortress of If. There he learns of a great hoard of treasure hidden on the Isle of Monte Cristo, and he becomes determined not only to escape, but also to use the treasure to plot the destruction of the 3 men responsible for his incarceration. Dumas's epic tale of suffering and retribution, inspired by a real-life case of wrongful imprisonment, was a huge popular success when it was first serialized in the 1840s. One of the things, I think it was an Ian Goobley video to bring him up twice. I think Emmy Reed has also mentioned this book a bunch. Any booktuber who has a channel has read this book, and I want to be in that club. But I think one of the things that Ian Goobley said was that this book was definitely like, it's the original revenge story. It's the original like retribution story. So I'm very excited to read it. Honestly, it's either this or 1Q84, which is technically 3 books, but this is definitely like the thickest book I got, but it wasn't even the most expensive. I got this entire thing for $16. And also, shout out to Three Lives and Company for the best receipt I've ever gotten. Look at that. That's so cute. It's handwritten. We take a subway, as you do when you're on vacation in New York, and we go to Rizzoli bookstore. I think it was Rumi that said about Rizzoli that it was like a dark academia bookstore, right? Like it was very like...
Very Oxford.
Very Oxford, that's the word you use. It was very... If We Were Villains was a bookstore, that's Rizzoli, but it doesn't have any of like the dumb main characters who can't make a decision, right? Very cool bookstore. I didn't talk to the employees that much. They were huddled around a computer, but what they were doing must have been really funny because they were laughing a lot. And I respect having fun on the job because at the end of the day, nothing matters. One of the books that I almost got was Normal People by Sally Rooney. And the reason I wanted to get Normal People was because I've heard very, very good things about Intermezzo. And I didn't want to get Intermezzo, which is only currently available in hardcover, if I didn't like Normal People. Now, Normal People, I think would be a very good introduction to Sally Rooney because from what I've heard, she has a very specific kind of writing style and writing aesthetic, for lack of a better term. And some people just click with it and some people don't. So I definitely wanted to get like a paperback Normal People before I got Intermezzo. Eventually, I decided not to get a Sally Rooney book, and I ended up getting the winner of the Booker Prize, for 2024, which is Orbital, a novel by Samantha Harvey. Awesome cover too. A slender novel of epic power named a Best Book of the Year by Oprah Daily and The Guardian. Orbital deftly snapshots one day in the lives of 6 women and men traveling through space. Selected for one of the last space station missions of its kind before the program is dismantled, these astronauts and cosmonauts from America, Russia, Italy, Britain, and Japan have left their lives behind to travel at a speed of over 17,000 miles an hour as the Earth reels below. Profound and contemplative, Orbital is a moving elegy to our environment and planet. I didn't even know that's what this book was about. This is my first time reading the blurb on the back of this. I think Jack Edwards mentioned this book in a video and said it was really good. And I trust that man. Of course, I bought the book, but I didn't realize it was like as short it was until the book itself said a slender, or the blurb itself said a slender novel. But if the Booker Prize says it's good, I'm gonna trust them too. Maybe I shouldn't trust Jack Edwards. Maybe I should just trust the Booker Prize. But very excited to read this. And while we didn't spend too much time, the best thing about Rizzoli was that it has seats. We were tired. There were like 4 chairs and 2 benches in that bookstore. We got our use out of those. We spent $18.51 at the Rizzoli bookstore for Orbital. This next bookstore, the last bookstore on our journey, I knew nothing about. Obviously, I didn't know a lot about most of these bookstores, but at this point in the original plan, I was at 14 bookstores, and I was like, you know what sounds better than 14? 15. So I wanted a 15th bookstore, and I just went to the first one that popped up on Google Maps. But even though this was our 13th bookstore in like kind of plan B of this video, I still got a book I've been wanting for a very long time. Probably our best interaction with one of the employees there. I asked one of the ladies who was checking me out at the register what the sales tax in New York is, and she said whatever it is, it's too damn much, which is objectively hilarious. And while I was at Jackson McNally bookstore, I don't know if I said that, not only did I get a little cool bookmark that shows like a little city landscape here, not only did I spend $25.04, but what I spent $25.04 on, the last book in this video, a book that's been on my TBR, probably the longest any book has been on my TBR, is Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. If y'all haven't seen Rumi and I's Alexander Hamilton video, something should be popping up. You should go watch that because I think it's a very good video. I've been wanting this book for a very long time. Realistically, I've been wanting this book since like 2016 or 2017. The New York Times calls this book, or calls the author, as elegant of an architect of monumental histories as we've seen in decades, as he vividly recreates the whole sweep of Alexander Hamilton's turbulent life. His exotic, brutal upbringing, his titanic feuds with celebrated rivals, his pivotal role in defining the shape of our federal government, his shocking illicit romances, his enlightened abolitionism, and his famous death in a duel with Aaron Burr in July 1804. I was thinking about what books to get. Again, this is like a multiple story bookstore. They have like every genre. They have new and old. They have everything there. And I was wondering, like, both not just ending the video, but also like I just went on a 2-day book buying trip with one of my best friends. Like I wanted it to be like a book that meant something, and I knew that when I saw this was going to be the book that I was going to get. I thought that it was also very like aesthetically very pretty. Like the books were organized very well. Like I said, the employees were very nice. The music wasn't too loud. There were 2 dogs and they were rad. But before we end this video, if you made it this far, I want to say thank you so much. This video, like I said in the beginning, has been in the works for a very long time, and I'm very happy that we're finally able to like bring it to life. You know, it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of money, don't get me wrong too. But I'm very happy that we've been able to kind of get it done after talking about it for so long. I got pen in hand. We're about to add a whole bunch of numbers. Give me a second. This has taken longer than I would like, so I recruited help. Okay, after roommate is trying to go to sleep, so the backlight is off. But after a little too much math, I spent, and the money that we're going to be donating is $265.44. This cent? What am I making, music? And after a bunch of, I was going to do a bunch of extensive looking, but I realized that I mentioned a few charities and stuff that you could donate to in my 2025 reading goals video. So I just took one of the charities from there, and the one that we're going with is First Book. It says Eliminating Barriers and Inspiring Young Minds. If you go to their Support Us page on their website, the first thing it says is $25 can help fill a backpack in need. But if you go down, it says your gift of $250 or more can help restock a school library. So some kids are going to learn how to read and have a pizza party with the $14 and change left over from my donation. So I'm going to do that right now. You're going to see the little thing up here. And yeah, I'm very happy that I was able to do this. Like I said, I feel weird if I spent a bunch of money and then made a video and then said, hey, I spent a bunch of money on books. Isn't that rad? So I'm glad I'm able to give back in my very small way. If you're able to donate, obviously make sure you're good, make sure your family's good. But if you're also able to donate, First Book seems like a really good organization, and I'm glad that I'm able to do that. Say hello. All right, so I was editing this video, and we were in what I like to call the EDM coffee shop, where they were blasting EDM music the whole time. And for whatever reason, who could tell, the audio sounds like trash. So we're going to do the outro again. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. It's been so much fun to come to New York with one of my best friends, and we bought a bunch of books, and we rode a bunch of subways, and we did a lot of walking. And we also got to donate a bunch of money. $265.44 is certainly not chump change when it comes to helping some kids out. So thank y'all for watching. This video is really just like a basis to see if I can make more videos like this in the future, and I think it went pretty well. Leave a like, a comment, and subscribe, all that good business if you enjoyed any and all of what I'm putting out, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.